even traveling for 1 week can feel better than everything else you did for the whole year in some way, or feels bigger. And traveling, I think, really teaches you actually to let go and surrender in the world. And once you start actually tuning into what's going, then suddenly, amazingly good things start to happen.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Meander Muse. I'm Erin Preston, your host, and today I'm talking with the infamous Max McCormick. He's an old friend and a fellow adventurer. He's also married to Jen Carney, who you may remember from the very first episode. Today we're just going to dive right in, so join the adventure. So what's your elevator speech about yourself?
Well, I'm 50-something years old. I was born in the United States. I grew up in Australia and currently living in Germany. I have an 18-year-old daughter, crazy. And I work somewhere in the vicinity of music and technology. I've just finished doing the soundtrack for a video game called Yerba Buena, which I believe is being released quite soon.
Fantastic. That was really good.
Why, thank you.
What is one of your craziest travel stories that you like to share with people?
It's a good question. I know some people probably look for crazy experiences. I don't. But the first thing that came to mind was probably around the time that I met Jen, or a few years after. I'd been reading books about Borneo and the rainforest and the indigenous culture there. And I started to get fascinated with it, also in the sense that it's a very untouched rainforest area of which there are not many left in the world, and also being aware that it was being decimated at an alarming pace. And I really just thought, all right, well, I'll figure it out, and I'll learn enough Indonesian to sort of get by. And luckily, in the end, I ended up having like maybe my oldest friend, who was a bit of a traveler and very sort of interesting chap. He was interested in going with me, and he enlisted also another friend of his who was actually living and working in Indonesia to come with us, which was actually good because he spoke Indonesian well, which, you know, in retrospect would have been very tough. I mean, we did rely a lot on sign language and gesticulating to get by, but having someone that could understand things was definitely helpful. But anyway, long story short, even trying to find maps of the area or where, you know, you could go was more or less impossible. So we were relying on finding people and drawing sort of old maps and things that didn't match up, and like people writing things down and drawing things, and nothing correlated at all. But we sort of figured out there's no roads going to this part of Borneo. So we had to take a plane, and the only planes that were going out there were missionaries. So we went out to Cessna, and the Cessna trip in itself was quite amazing, just flying over it, because you could really see that the whole island was crisscrossed with logging rows and was decimated. At any rate, we finally got there, and more or less we were just traipsing through the jungle and figuring out our way through the places, and going from village to village, kind of finding the headman and figuring out where we were at, and, you know, whether we could stay there. And, you know, it definitely was a kind of a crazy adventure, because one of the guys was very unfit, and so the jungle just killed him. And at one point he just literally passed out on the road and wouldn't move from there. And we were miles and miles from any kind of civilization. There's definitely no infrastructure.
Like deep in the jungle.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, all right, this is going to suck. He's probably going to die right here. And, you know, and I was thinking about the consequences of all that. Other than that, there was another time that was...
Whoa. Are you going into a different story?
Slightly, yes.
Okay. First of all, just because some of us aren't as familiar with you, so where exactly is Borneo?
Well, the main chain of islands that comprise Indonesia. So it's sort of roughly maybe to the east of Malaysia.
Okay.
And to the north of Indonesia.
And so you flew from San Francisco straight to Indonesia? And then did you have to take multiple flights?
I'm probably, I mean, I don't really recall, but I could almost guarantee that I had to fly to Jakarta first and then take a sort of a more local flight to get to Borneo. It then was a huge, like the Amazon or something, just this huge kind of untapped area. But recently, the Indonesians have decided to move their capital city, Jakarta, to thousands of miles away to Kalimantan, which is what the Indonesians call their part of the island Borneo, because the city of Jakarta is sinking into the ground from, basically environmental mismanagement and so on, overpopulation. They actually have a plan to move the entire city to Borneo. So they're basically building from scratch a whole new thing. And of course, they're doing this maybe in a way that Brasilia was built or something. In some way, they're trying to sort of colonize this raw piece of earth. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
So by the time you got to Borneo, it had already changed quite a bit.
No, I mean, well,
when you said you flew over and
oh yes, with the logging, yeah, that really was a profound experience. There's sort of a central plateau, and the central plateau is where the roads were not able to get into just because it was too rough, and so you literally could just see the contrast as you got into the central plateau. Suddenly, it turned into this beautiful dense rainforest. But yeah,
wow. And so, what were the people like?
I mean,
on the island, like, were you finding like the chief?
Yeah, I mean, usually you would find the chief and do the sort of negotiations with him, and then he would find he would line up a guide or a house that we could stay in, and then they would feed us as well, and we'd agree on some kind of a price. But yeah, I mean, people, I think, like a lot of indigenous people, they're not the most effusive people, I guess, verbally, and probably not towards strangers as we were. But that said, they were very hospitable, and people were hospitable in general. And the guides, I remember having a lot of interesting, fun conversations with them. So, people are people all over the world. So yeah, I think the general, just not being
someone that's like, I'm headed to Borneo.
Yeah, and it was a little bit half-assed, and it wasn't like being perfectly equipped and everything, and getting there and figuring it out and not really having all of the right stuff, and of course facing all the consequences of that. For example, I had these shoes which I thought would be fun for walking in the jungle, because you have to go walk through a lot of rivers. So they were like river rafting shoes, and they have all these holes in them. But what I didn't count on was that there's a lot of leeches there. So, there were some days where you could see all the leeches all around you, kind of suddenly sensing you and kind of pointing themselves towards you, and suddenly just kind of hopping. Almost, you could feel
big ones.
Mostly not. I mean, they're that big, but you could sense their excitement. Whoa, what do we got here? So yeah, so then I realized, these shoes weren't such a great idea, because obviously they come to you through your feet. So
yeah.
But yeah, so it was kind of a bit. That's why crazy. I think it was a little bit kind of quick and madcap. And in the end, after my friend ended up getting up and moving, the other guy, his friend who was living in Indonesia, he was just completely freaked out by the experience. So as soon as we got to the next town that had a plane landing there, he just negotiated.
He was
he didn't even talk to us. He's like, guys, I'm on the next plane. See you later. It was just way too much for him. And then the two of us continued on, and ironically, to get back to the coast, to make it to the nearest river tributary where you can take river boats, we took rides with logging companies. Paradoxically, the best forest that we saw was the forest that was on the logging roads that were created by the logging companies, because they just literally cut right through this amazing forest. So yeah, anyway, eventually we sort of made it back. But
so
yeah,
your friend survived.
Yeah, he did. I'm really glad that he survived.
Yeah, because trekking through the jungle's no joke, right? Aren't you just pouring sweat?
You're just
humidity and
yeah. I mean,
Did you have machetes? Were you bushwhacking too, or were you?
We were generally following paths. And because there were settlements out there, and obviously over time there are paths that are created, and And when we were off the path, we usually had guides, and the guides were very adept with machetes, so we just utilized their skills in that area.
And the guides were cool.
Oh yeah, really. I have fond memory. Oh, specifically of a couple of guides that we had, maybe for a longer period. Yeah, they were like super cool. They mostly just walked barefoot.
Yeah,
they were like, well, it's they were like, well, it's much faster and beyond.
Sure,
it's like,
makes sense. They're used to. They've made friends with the leeches. They're like,
yeah, they didn't seem to be particularly bothered by it.
Yeah,
by those things.
Yeah, when Jen was telling me the story of you guys in the Amazon, that was one of her crazy stories, is that how people who live there can be with short sleeve shirt and working, and they're just, the insects and the mosquitoes don't bother them or something. It's like they've had some sort of immunity built to them, or the mosquitoes like, I got you one too many times. Something going on. Or
I mean, there must be some kind of scientific explanation for it. I mean, because I think it's absolutely true. But it happens even here. Like, don't you know? I mean, I notice, like, if I'm sleeping with Jen, I mean, the mosquitoes bite her. They know, but they know what the nice, fresh, soft skin is, and they leave me alone.
Well, that happens to me a lot, where I'm the last person bit, which I really appreciate, but I think it's because they know I have malaria.
Ah, wow.
So they're like,
right.
Not her. Also, some context to us, obviously, since Jen met Max, they fell in love very quickly. And then I moved to Chile, and we all met up in Cusco because I was traveling with Jen. And then we've seen each other in multiple parts of the world since.
Yes.
I think it was within a year and a half of meeting that we were in Cusco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably.
I see Max as someone much more adventurous than I am, because he'll just go trekking and no one will know where he is for a couple weeks due to being deep in a mountain range.
Well, there might be something in that. There's some kind of a nice feeling of knowing that no one in the world knows where you are. I don't know if anyone else has that feeling. Maybe it's like embracing being alone rather than being afraid of being alone.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, sometimes when the pressure is taken off of having to be found from yourself, where you're like, I'm signing up, or I've lost my phone before and didn't have my computer, and it felt like true freedom. I was like, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm fine. And so taking the pressure off yourself to also stay in touch, it can be such a relief. Like, you're like, well, I can do whatever I want. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, and realizing that you aren't, in the end, you aren't responsible to other people. You're kind of responsible to yourself.
Yeah, because I remember talking to Jen once, and she was like, well, I haven't heard from him for 2 weeks. If I don't hear from him after week 3, then I'll start getting concerned.
Yeah.
Because she knows that about you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, it's probably also has a lot to do with how I was brought up, how it was modeled, go and take care of yourself. Don't bother me.
Right. Well, we grew up in that, you're a little bit older, but, I grew up where, especially, let's just say summer break, they kicked us out in the morning, and then they were like, come back for a lunch snack.
Yeah.
And they kicked us out, and then you had to be home for dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I relate to that. I mean, I grew up in a city in suburbia, but also when I think back now, I'm not a nostalgic person in general, but I do start to feel a bit of nostalgia, especially when I see how kids are growing up these days. I feel a bit of nostalgia for that kind of freedom, like that lack of concern from the parents, but the corresponding freedom. And for me, like, it certainly was the thing that kind of triggered me to be creative, right? Because when you're bored and you have nothing to do, you start sort of thinking about, how you can entertain yourself. And like, for me, it was like, I was growing up in a suburb where they were knocking down all the houses and the old houses and putting in, new apartments and things like that. So, my home was like these building sites, just going around and creating all these imaginary worlds in these building sites where, no one was really aware. Maybe no one was aware where you were or what you were doing. And in fact, sometimes I actually forgot about time, and they did get worried because I'd go off before everyone got up in the morning, and I'd go off and play and then forget about time and stuff. And then everyone would be like, oh, those were good times growing up in the 70s and 80s, I think.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me about you at all.
Mm-hmm. You're reminding me of all these things.
Like, I'm just going to get out, go on adventures. I'll see you when I see you.
Yeah, it was just like so boring. You'd make your own breakfast, and then you're like, what now?
There's a whole world.
There's a whole world out there, yeah.
Or created.
Yeah.
So in the context of what you just said about Borneo, do you, in all of your other adventures where you've gone trekking by yourself for a couple weeks, what advice do you have for people who are like, I'd really like to go to this place, but it seems far off or crazy, or I would have to be super prepared? And granted, things are a little bit different now, but from the spirit of adventure advice, what would you tell someone?
I don't know. I mean, I'll come back to like something that Henry Miller wrote. Every day we slaughter our finest impulses. And so I think a lot of it is just about just that, like not letting your brain like shut down your impulses and put it into some kind of schema in which it's, bad, dangerous, or whatever excuse you'll use. Because you'll basically, if you think about anything long enough, you'll always talk yourself out of it. As far as being adventurous, I mean, I think everyone has to do something that's comfortable for them, right? So what's comfortable for me is probably completely different for someone who's maybe never traveled or is young or maybe female, or there's all kinds of things. So, I mean, obviously, you can start small with that. But I mean, I think it's just about, in the end, following your curiosity. And probably for me, the curiosity arose from National Geographics when I was young, and putting the maps up all over my bedroom wall. I didn't have like pop stars like in those Spielberg movies of the 80s. I had like maps of different places, and just studying those and doing that was maybe the first thing that sort of just got me intrigued, because you're looking at a name and a place or some kind of geography, and like trying to kind of map that into reality is really interesting. And I don't think everyone needs to do it. It's not for everyone, but if you have curiosity about or questions about anything, whatever it may be, I say just do it. Follow them.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I love that quote you just used, because that's so true. That's why I'm trying to follow through on some things. I'm like, I have absolutely no idea how to do this, but I suppose the journey is in the adventure of just trying.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe putting some consistency in it.
True. The last question I want to ask you is, what is something you've learned from travels that you put into practice on a daily basis? And that can be from emotional, mental, physical skill, but anything that really pops into your mind.
So, I mean, the context for me for traveling originally was that I had been working in a job where I was heading towards burnout, just working every day and working as long as I could work, just trying to get the project done. Because when you're young, you're very loyal, and I was part of a team. And
as an engineer?
Yeah. And it had a higher purpose because, it was for the jet propulsion laboratory and the space tracking, and there was time elements that were in there as well. So,
so is that for NASA?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing about that is, as you know, when you're working like that, what happens is time takes on a different meaning. So like weeks go by like seconds because you're not creating any new kind of synaptic connections. You're just doing the same thing. Your sense of time is weirdly kind of compressed in a way. And saying it now, it seems like kind of obvious, but I think at the time I really didn't understand anything about the nature of that. And so traveling, when I first went, which was kind of an impulse, I would say, as well, which I didn't know where it was going to go or what was going to come out of it, turned out to be kind of like a a laboratory sort of for the understanding the self. So for me, it actually had very profound implications, which there's probably many, but I mean, just to focus on the one thing, like time, when you're traveling, just for a start, because you're having experiences, like even traveling for 1 week can feel better than everything else you did for the whole year in some way, or it feels bigger, and even just the, understanding how to work with time. Like you have to wait for buses and you don't have any control over it. So you just have to wait. And then when you're on it, it could take 20 hours. And so you just have to,
or break down on a cliff.
Yeah. And at first it can be, it's irritating because that's how you normally respond to things, because you're always focused on some kind of goal that you're trying to control. And traveling, I think, really teaches you actually to let go and surrender. And instead of just focusing on what's up here, actually being very attentive and alive to what's going on in the world. And once you start actually tuning into what's going, then suddenly amazingly good things start to happen. Like actually kind of to the point where you can control reality, which is a bit weird saying it like that. But there's some kind of, I'd say it's more or less like a Taoist type of philosophy. Like you still have like maybe an objective, but you're more or less responding and passive in your approach to getting there. And I think for me that was a very big lesson, because I'd spent, probably the 10 years, all of my university studies and all of my work that I'd done up to that point, really just in this highly focused mode of just achieving the goal and trying to impress someone or whatever. So travel, where time just suddenly opened up like that for me, and that changed my whole approach to time. And of course, obviously, like you said, you're not going to apply that 100% in your life in the Western world, but you can't really, but you can certainly try to integrate that thinking into it. And I think for me, it was transformational. It's part of who I am today, I guess.
Absolutely. And I love what you say about time, because it's so true. Since I live in Colorado, let's say to my favorite hot spring, it's a 4-hour drive. And if I stay overnight and come back the next night, sometimes it feels like I got a week of rest in 36 hours or something like that. Or the last time I was in Greece, I feel like I blinked and a week was gone, but there was no time. Those places where it just, I don't think I made one plan the whole time that involved time. It was like, I'll just see you on the side of the plaza when I see you, kind of thing. And it was so crazy because it's almost like I absorbed as much of that as possible. And then all of a sudden it was over. I think maybe it went so quickly because all of a sudden I had to leave it. And I said to people, I was like, I don't know what happened. And they're like, oh, yeah, because it's a seasonal place. And they're like, we get here in May, and all of a sudden, and we're like, how is it October? And I was like, wow, because I think when you're sometimes so in a place.
Yeah, you more or less just got rid of the dimension of time from your whole perception of reality.
Yeah, and your whole nervous system isn't tracking it. It just is like without time or something. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's such a good thing. Well, thank you so much. Those were my questions. Do you have any last reflections? Anything you'd like to say?
Well, I just want to say thanks. I've never been interviewed before. So
in your life?
Yeah, really. I mean, I've interviewed other people, but I've never been interviewed, in my life. And so it is quite interesting to sort of be put on the spot and to try and see if you can compose your ideas semi-intelligent way. But no, what I would really like to say, Aaron, is that, since I've known you, I've, really, I feel like every time our paths cross, we always have a very, very interesting conversation, a philosophical conversation about life. And I like a lot that you have an inquiring mind, always curious and asking questions, which I think is a rare kind of attribute in this day and age. So thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, because I think that sometimes the seekers, or the ones that are constantly going out and asking questions, to what's around them, but they don't say it out loud or
Mm-hmm.
directly. And so once you get around another one that you know what's going on, tell me things, idea of poetry in motion, if you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I get in a bad mood and then I can't see the poetry in the moment.
Maybe that's the necessary other side of the coin.
Yeah. So thank you. What I love about this conversation is that we start out with a story of travel in Borneo and inevitably end up somewhere philosophical, which are my favorite. So thank you all for coming along, and until next time, keep following your curiosity, stay open to the unexpected, and let go of time.